or my, it says my network, so don't come after me. No, we don't want you to do this on your production network, guys. And the reason why we say that is because
the fact that I've
some of these tools,
knowledge,
as soon as you fire them up, you're going to set off a lot of alarms. So before we build up this lab, you are going to raise your left hand systems or antivirus and swear the following
and I just don't want you to do anything that
we
could
refer to these as the super deal rules. And they go like
You're
this.
also going to make sure that you
promise
not try out these tools
you will not try out any of these tools on your network
who's
or
made you
my,
upset on Facebook
my network. So don't come after me.
I know, you guys are like, Dale,
no, we don't want you to do this on your production network, guys. You're also understand that the author, that would be me, nor plural site, is responsible for what you do. Listen, if you guys take some of these tools and you go off do things that are illegal, super deal. The last thing I want to hear is, and they go like
you're
this.
Also going to
first thing is you
promise
try out these tools.
Billy Bob
will not try out any of these tools on your network who's made you upset on. That's not going to happen. Don't come after me.
You guys are like,
no, we don't want you to do this on your production network. You're also understand that
I'm a firm believer in what we refer to as consequences. We all have
that would be me.
The ability to make choices
is responsible for what you do. Listen, if you guys take some of these tools and you go off do things that are illegal, super deal. The last thing I want to hear is they go like also the first thing is you promise Billy Bob will not try out any of these tools or anybody huge hero. That's not one of my favorite things is not. We don't want you to do this on your production network. You're also understand that
firm believer in what we refer to as consequences.
We all have responsibility. The ability to make choices is responsible for what you do. Listen, you guys take some of these tools and you go off do things that are illegal. Super deal. Last thing I want to hear is they go like also the first thing is you promise Billy Bob will not try out any of these tools or anybody huge hero. That's not one of my favorite things is not. We don't want you to do this on your production network. You're also understand that.
Let's talk about our virtual lab.
The author designed this course so that would be me. Play around to make choices is responsible for what you do. In order to set this up, you guys take some of these tools and go off do things that are illegal. Super deal. Last thing I want to hear is they go like also the first thing is you promise and then will not try out any of these tools one of my favorite things is you don't necessarily want to do this on your production network. You're also understand that. Let's talk about our virtual lab. The author designed this course so that would be me. And all the time you make choices is responsible for what you do. In order to set this up, you guys take some of these tools and go as far as the virtual super deal. Last thing I want to hear is they go like also the first thing is you promise and then will not comfortable with any of these that I'm about to show you, don't worry. I'm going to walk you through the virtualization technology that I enjoy, which is called Hyper-V. I'll take you through step by step. I'll show you how you can install this. It's not going to cost you anything. We can use evaluation stuff here, guys. So yes, you can use Hyper-V, which is something that comes on all these server platform products by Microsoft, as well as they just included it, by the way, in Windows 8.1 Enterprise Edition, which is kind of cool. You can also use VMware, and you could even use something very, very basic like VirtualBox. Now, VirtualBox, I believe, is still free. VMware also has a free product out there. Hyper-V has its own free product, but it's kind of an interesting SKU. One of their SKUs is just called Hyper-V Server, and that is actually free, but if you fire that bad boy up, you're going to get a DOS prompt. And unless you know how to manage a server from a DOS prompt, you're in trouble because there's no GUI. But again, I'm going to show you what we're going to do is we're going to go install an operating system. And with Microsoft platform, you can install and run a 180-day eval of a particular OS. And then I'm going to show you a nifty little command that we can type in that would allow me to renew that evaluation for up to 3 times. So 180 times 3, yeah, that's quite a bit. So first of all, let's talk about that host machine as far as the requirements are concerned. The first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that you have an OS for the Hyper-V environment. I'm going to be either running Windows 8.1 Enterprise or Server 2012 R2. This host machine should also have at least 16 gigs of RAM. Now, you might be able to get away with a command that we can type in that would allow me to renew that evaluation for up to 3 times. So 16, 180 times 3 would actually be better. Yeah, that's quite a bit. You'll also need to make sure that you have at least a 50 gig hard drive. Now, the hard drive I'm going to be using
is a solid
The first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that you have an OS.
My virtual machines will probably be a little snappier.
I'm going to be either running Windows 8.1
if
Enterprise
or standard
Server
hard
2012
drive.
R2. Now, when I say you need at least
this
a 50 gig hard drive,
should also have
free
at least
space.
16 gigs of
50
RAM.
gigs
Now,
of
you might be able to get away with
to run these
command
12
gigs,
type in,
maybe 8,
and you also
obviously want to have a
for up to
network
3
interface
times.
card on this.
So
host
16, 32
times 3
network interface card will be connected up to
also
your...
need to make sure that you have at
first
least
of all, let's talk about that host machine. As far as the requirements are
directly to the internet.
The first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that you have an OS.
This
host probably
should be a little
environment. You're going to be either running Windows research on Enterprise.
Talking about vulnerability research.
Now, when I say you need this host machine should also have at least
space
16 gigs of
50
RAM.
gigs.
But the virtual machines themselves, they 12 gigs.
That would allow me to
and you also obviously
as far as the virtual
machines are concerned, we're going to fire up 32 times 3 network interface card. After we bring up our host, also need to make sure. First of all, let's talk about that hard machine. Then we'll go through and install Windows. The first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that now this host server should be a little environment. Now, when I say this host machine should also have at least 16 gigs of RAM. But the virtual machines themselves, they 12 gigs. And you also want to as far as the virtual machines are concerned, we're going to fire 32 times 3 network interface card. After we bring up our host, also need to make sure. First of all, let's talk about that hard machine. Then we'll go through and install Windows. The first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that now this host server should be a little environment. This host machine should also have at least 16 gigs of RAM. And you also want to as far as the virtual machines are concerned, we're going to fire 32 times 3 network interface card. After we bring up our host, also need to make sure. First of all, let's talk about that hard machine. Then we'll go through and install Windows. The first thing you do is you need to make sure that now this host server should be a little environment. This host machine should also have a I've shortened up the links that allow you to go off and grab a copy of Windows 7. Comes in about, I think it's like 5 or 6, maybe 7 different files that you'll download. You'll then launch the first file, which will uncompress them. This particular version of Windows 7, though, was actually built off of Virtual PC, which was
something that came with Vista back in the old days. It was so that you could play around with newer operating systems. So we'll have to take a little extra care in setting that particular product up. We have to remove the components for virtual PC out of it, and then it comes right into Hyper-V with no problems. But don't worry, I'll show you how to do that. As far as getting a hold of Kali, we're just simply going to go to the website, www.kali.org, and they have a link there for downloading Kali, and you'll see it come in either a full, mini, or VMware edition. The VMware edition is exactly what it sounds like. It's an edition that you can download a file, you can download it and mount it immediately inside of VMware. Apparently there's no love for Microsoft there. There's also the mini edition, which you can install on a bootable device like a thumb drive. And then they have a full edition. I'll be grabbing the full edition and running it from the ISO in the virtual machine. Now, in order to get the trial editions, easiest place to go to get those bad boys is going to be on the TechNet Evaluation Center. And again, I'll take you through as we walk you through how to install each one. I'll show you how to go out and find the file, download it, set it up inside of Hyper-V, where I'll actually start off with setting up the host machine. But I'll take you through step by step. Don't worry, I've got your back. Now, for those of you guys that are a little bit more advanced, and if you guys are familiar with the Microsoft VHD program, you could also use those files. These are basically Hyper-V machines that have been pre-created. All you have to do is mount them inside of Hyper-V, fire them up. You don't even have to go through a full installation. I will be installing Server 2012 R2 and Windows 8.1 via the VHD program, just because it makes it easy and I don't have to go through a full installation. Okay, so let's review this before we get into the setup of the host machine. I get a lot of questions in the discussion forums about what the goal is here. So let me try to clarify it. We are trying to use a physical system to install a virtualized platform so that we can then load virtualized computers or operating systems that we throw attacks against. Got it? Now, if you want to use Windows 10 or the latest server platform for your host machine, then go for it, so long as it supports virtualization. Now, the reason why I include this step-by-step of installing the host machine is that some viewers might be new to virtualization or they've never set it up before. So we'll be patient with them. Now, as far as the virtualized OSs are concerned, if you're not able to get a hold of things like Windows 8 or Server 2012 R2, the goal here is just to look at how different operating systems will respond. So again, don't focus on I couldn't download this particular OS because it's no longer available. Instead, replace it with something different that you do have access to so that you can see what the attacks look like against those machines. So the host machine is going to be a little unique in the fact that you will have to burn the file that I'm about to show you. You have to burn this to DVD or maybe put it onto a bootable USB drive. But what you're going to want to do is very simply go to the TechNet Evaluation Center. And you can get there by Googling it. And you'll have to come in and log in. You can see I've actually logged in. It requires a Microsoft account, so like either Hotmail or an Outlook.com account. And afterwards, this is actually kind of a great place to come to get some updates of what's coming out. Plus, you can kind of play around. They've got some virtual labs that you can play around with. But I'm going to come over here to the to the Evaluate Now drop-down. And I'm going to come down here and select I'd like to run Server 2012 R2. You'll notice here that we have Windows 8.1. Guess what? I'm going to be coming back here to get Windows 8.1 a little later. But I'm going to go ahead and start this. Grab the 2012. And it breaks it down. It shows me all the different 2012 products here, including the Essentials product. Here's that Hyper-V server that's completely free. Notice it's unlimited. Where the other ones typically have are, and of course there's a Hyper-V Server 2012 R2, so there's the R2 editions, which is a newer edition for those of you guys that aren't familiar with it. The other ones are 180-day evals. So you'll notice up here, it says 180-day eval. It asks me what type of an install I want to use. Well, because this is going to be my host machine, I'm going to grab the ISO. Hit register to continue. I'm going to stop the video just for a second. In your world, you're going to see it come up and verify some information about you. And then you'll continue from there. So hang on, I'll be right back with you. So it comes up and says, hey, where do you want to save this file? And I've got a folder here that I just created called CEH Project. I'm going to come in here. Here's a subdirectory that I called ISOs, where I'm going to place my ISOs. And I'm just going to give this a different name, though, because this could be really confusing for me. So I'm going to call this one Server 2012 R2 Trial. Now, I'm going to use this 2 different times. I'm going to have this as a physical DVD, which I'll burn out using some type of DVD burning software, hopefully you have. Or I could move it over to a bootable USB drive. But then I'm also going to use it later because I want to have a virtual machine that's also running 2012. So I'm going to use this file twice. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And that's going to start the download. Well, let's go, while we're here, let's go get the other source CDs. I'm going to come back up here and select I'd like to get Windows 8.1 Enterprise. Same thing comes up here. Looks like this is only a 90-day eval, but that's okay. I'm going to show you, remember, I'm going to show you a command that's going to allow you to reset the 90 days when it expires or when you get close to expiring. So you get another 90 days, and you can do that 3 times. Again, I'm going to continue to register, and again, I'm not going to show you. So hang on, I'll be right back with you. Okay, again, it's kicking me up and asking me where do I want to save the ISO. So I'm going to just highlight all this thing, and I'm going to make this easy to remember. I'm just going to call this Windows 8.1 Trial. So I'm going to hit save, and we'll let that download. Okay, while those are downloading, I'm going to go ahead and grab Windows Server 2008 R2. The easiest way to do this is just do a simple Google search for, I usually do trial. You can see here, Server 2008 R2. In this case here, it's my first link up here. So I'm just going to click on it. Takes me to the download section here for 2008 R2. Again, it's a 180-day eval. I'm going to select the language. I'm going to hit continue. Again, it's going to ask me where do you want to save this. I'm going to call this one again Server 2008 R2 Trial. I'll let that download. Now, going after Windows 7 is a little bit more difficult. And the reason behind that is because, again, Microsoft is wanting people to not necessarily try Windows 7. You more than likely are using it already. They'd prefer you to actually use Windows 8.1. So if I go back to that previous Google search, you'll notice that there's a link here that says to grab a, Windows Server 08 R2 and Windows 7 eval version. This is actually on a Microsoft site. It takes you this nice little article. Windows about how 7 you can get a hold is a little bit more difficult. If you click on the link for Windows 7, it actually takes you to the eval center and does not pull up Windows 7. It pulls up strictly the Windows 8 stuff because they've taken the 7 off. Now, in order for me to fix that for you guys, what I've done is there is an evaluation version available to you. Now, this evaluation version is based off of Windows 7 Service Pack 1 with Internet Explorer 9. There's 7 separate downloads, and I did some tiny URLs for you so you can find them very quickly. If you will just go to http://ethicalw7p1 and then obviously through P7 would be the downloads. Grab those. We're going to put those into a single directory, just like I've done here. The first one is an version available to you. And the rest of them are just raw files that are needed for the executable to launch. When you uncompress these, in fact, while those other ones are downloading, let's go ahead and uncompress that. I'm going to just double-click on it. Version it's going to bring up a license based off of Windows for me. I'm going to hit next, or I should say I agree. It then says, where do you want to uncompress this? Well, we're going to uncompress this. I'm going to create a folder here called, we'll go Windows 7. This may take some time to uncompress. So while that's uncompressing, I'm a multitasking type of guy. Let's go ahead and get a hold of Kali for us. So we're going to come back to our web interface, and we're just going to simply type in www.kali.org. Okay, so this is the Kali web page. And just a side note, depending on when you're watching this particular course, the page could change, but obviously you can adjust to that. You're competent. I know you are. We're going to come here to the Downloads section and select Download Kali Linux. And I am then presented with a plethora Yeah, it's a great word. A plethora of options here. And these options are based off of different versions. And within each version, 64-bit or 32-bit, there's also versions within those. And then they've also got these virtualized machines that they've already created. Oh, look at that. They did give Microsoft some love. So if you want, you could download this Hyper-V file here and just mount it inside of a Hyper-V virtual machine that you've created. And of course, if you scroll down here a bit more, they have some here for ARM, if you have any ARM CPU-based systems that you want to try to use it on. But again, I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm going to go ahead and select the 64-bit full version. You could do this via torrent. Please don't. I mean, I understand that torrents are great as far as file transfers are concerned, but we all know what other people use it for, and I'm not a real big fan of downloading any file from a torrent just because of they're typically packed with other things. Obviously, I wouldn't get it from here, but other files. But that's for a whole nother course as well. I'm going to select the HTTP option here. The torrent version would go faster. Now, also a side note, you could select the light version and then actually upgrade the light version to the full version. But when you do that, it has to download everything that you would have gotten anyway if you would have selected the full version. In this case here, it's about 2 gigs. So we might as well grab it now. I'm going to hit the HTTP option there, and then it gives me a name here. It's going to be an ISO file. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And we're going to go ahead and let that download. And when we come back in the next clip, we'll actually show you how to set all this up. Okay, listen up. If some of the links that you're dealing with here expire on you, don't worry about it. Just go get a DVD or an ISO from another source. If by chance you're thinking of sourcing those files from a pirate site or a torrent site, please don't. When you get to my ethical hacking malware threats course, you'll start to see why. Now, I know you might insist on still trying to use those types of files. And if you do, good luck on having a secure machine. In fact, maybe you should just take your hands off the keyboard and slowly walk away from the computer. So in order to fire up my host machine, this may sound kind of weird, but I can't really show you on a physical box. I can't install any type of software to record what I'm doing to show you without an OS installed. It's kind of like I can't put gas in the gas tank of a car until I've built the car and put the gas tank in. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using some virtualization to emulate, and I'm going to go through the exact same steps that you would go through on a physical box. So here's my virtual machine. What I did is I've gone through and I've built this up, but again, this would be equivalent of your host box that's just sitting there. I've gone through and you'll notice here that I've actually put in a DVD. It's a virtualized DVD drive that has mounted to it this ISO for Server 2012 that we downloaded. This is the equivalent of you taking that ISO. I told you you'll need to take that ISO and burn that out to a DVD for the host installation. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and select that I'd like to start this bad boy up. Let the hamsters run around the wheel for a second here. So I'll hit next. My only option now is to install, because it's a brand new system, obviously. I'll hit install. We'll let the hamsters run around the wheel here. So then I'm presented with an option of which virtual machine I'd like to install. Now in this particular case, because this is just going to be my own little machine I'm going to play around with as my host machine, I'm going to install this with the standard server edition with the GUI interface. Trust me, you don't want core unless you want to go back and try to manage a server from a command line interface, which you Linux guys, you might find enjoyable. I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Then asks me to accept the EULA. And hit next. And then I can do, it's kind of funny they have the upgrade, even though it's a bare drive. You're not going to do an upgrade. You're going to do a custom install. And you can see there's my hard drive. This would be whatever size your hard drive is in your host machine. I'm going to select next. And it's going to go through the process of copying the files over first to the hard drive. Then it goes through and gets the files ready for installation, and it goes through relatively quickly. A little bit of inside info here for you guys. Microsoft, starting with Server 2008, which would have also included Windows Vista. I know, I just gave you a chill went down your spine when I said that word, Vista, huh? It's like Mufasa. Ooh. I'm kidding. What Microsoft's goal is for someone to be able to install an operating system within 15 minutes. And they've gotten, those guys that have played around with Microsoft OSs and installed them before, they are very, very close to that. In some cases, I usually get about within 15 minutes. And they're really, really close to that. Installing on a solid state drive, I've timed it, and I can install a full server 2012 box in about 8 minutes flat. Now, I'm not going to make you wait around here for 8 minutes, so we're going to pause the video, and when we come back, we'll continue where we left off. Okay, so it's gone through, and I'm going to restart for the first time. I'm going to go ahead and select restart. We don't have to wait for the green bar to go across. There's nothing magical about the green bar. Obviously, I don't want to press any key, otherwise I'll go through and start up the installation all over again. Get our wonderful Windows splash screen. Hamsters are picking up speed. It's now doing a plug-and-play detection to find out what hardware is on the device. One thing I'm going to go ahead and cover this while we're here as well. So when we set up the host machine, we mentioned in the prereqs is that the host machine should have at least 16 gigs of memory. The one thing you don't want to do is over-allocate your memory to your virtual machines. And what I mean by that is if I've got 16 gigs, I want to make sure that of the 16, 1 gig I'm always going to keep in reserve for the host OS. So I could take the leftover, the 15 gig, and divvy that up between the different machines. And this is another reason why we talked about earlier that we're not going to fire up all the machines at the same time because you may not have enough resources to do that. Okay, so after it did the plug and play, it reboots again. And the spinning circle is supposed to hypnotize you and making you think that time is going by faster than what it really is. So look closely at the dots. You're getting very sleepy.
Shout out kay Mark.
Microsoft products is what it says. Okay, so the first thing it's going to go through and do is ask me to put in a password. Password does have to meet the complexity requirements initially, but we're going to go through and disable that so that we can play around a little bit easier. But for now, I'm going to put in a top secret password. And when we say it has to meet the complexity requirements, it means it has to have a combination of an uppercase, a lowercase, a number, and a special character. And I'll show you what my password is. You can see it's top secret. PA $$. Whoa, I misspelt it. Let me do that again. PA $$W0RD. So it looks just like password. There we go. And I apologize if I just guessed your passwords, because I know some of you guys are probably using this as your production password. See, that's how good of a hacker I am. Make sure both of them are the same. And this is for the local administrative account. I'm going to go ahead and hit next here. Okay, so then we're brought to an initial login screen. So we're going to go through here and we'll log in by throwing a Control-Delete. Now I can't really throw one because it's a virtual machine. So instead I'm going to come up here and do the equivalent of it. You would have thrown a Control-Delete and then you're going to type in your funky password that we typed in before. You will not see this. This is part of my virtualization environment. I'll actually go full screen so we look good now. Okay, so now again I'm going to log in here. Try this one more time. You should only have to log in once. Mine was because it's a virtual machine and I was getting in remotely. We get the awesome black screen of death. No, I'm kidding. Just a black background. Initially here. If you've got an awesomely fast machine, you're probably already waiting for me here. So hang on a second, be patient. Okay, so when it's done and settled in, we have our what they refer to as the server manager dashboard. We'll go through and give you some information on how to set this machine up. You can take whatever, some of the stuff isn't like as important. For example, I'm going to come in here to my local server. And when you install, by default, Microsoft gives it a computer name that's kind of random. Always starts with Win. You can come in here and you can change this to whatever name you want. I'm going to call mine ethical hacking host. And it's not going to be a member domain. It's going to be just in a work group. Now, this is going to require me to restart my computer. I'm not necessarily going to restart right now. I can always restart later. And I'm also going to go through and make sure I've got an IP address. Because my virtual machine is not hooked up to the internet, I don't have one. If this is your host machine and you've got it behind your router, you should get an IP address, and it should be able to get out to the internet. One of the other things I'm going to do on this host machine is I'm going to turn off the wonderful IE enhancement security configuration, which is the setting that basically bugs you every time on a server. You want to go to a website, it'll bug you and say, are you sure you want to allow this website? Are you sure you want to allow this website? Are you sure you want to allow this website? Over and over and over. Right now it's on. I'm going to come in here and click on the on section and select I'd like to actually turn these off, both for the administrator and for a user who may log in. I'm also going to change my time zone here. I'm not Pacific. I am a mountain. Hit OK. As far as the reporting is concerned, I'm going to turn that off just because this is a demo machine. Normally, real servers, I turn this on because what happens is that Microsoft is and the NSA is allowed to spy on you. No, I'm teasing. What this does is it actually helps Microsoft. They don't collect detailed information or private information about you or like what product code you're using and stuff. What they do collect is information about when the machine crashed. The reason why I enjoy turning this on is I've actually had it help me. Where I was having some problems, and then down here, my little action center, it actually popped up. Oh, look at that. They've already solved an issue for me. They will tell you, I had it pop up and say, hey, we found an issue for you. The issue was concerning a chipset driver from Intel, and it actually gave me a direct link to Intel, not just to the intel.com. They weren't that lazy. It took me to the actual web page to download that particular driver. So it's telling me here that Smart Screen is going to be turned on currently, or excuse me, it's currently turned off, which means it's going to not warn me when I download files and try to execute them from the internet. I'm going to just turn off those messages so I don't see those again. And, yep, oh, there's still one more problem. What's the important message? Let me look at my messages here. That may be a false positive popping up on me here. Yeah, that's not going to stop me from continuing to configure. So let's continue on. And you'll notice here just for this demo, I'm using a whopping 2 gig of RAM. Obviously, in your host machine, you're going to want to have the 16 gig. I'm just trying to show you how to get the host machine here set up. The big thing that we really want to do here is I want to come back to my dashboard. Technically, you don't have to necessarily come back to the dashboard. Makes it easy because you can get to this configure this local server option, but you can also get to it under the managed section. Where I'm trying to get to is this add roles and features. So I can click either up there or down here. I'm going to select to add a role or a feature, and the feature role that I'm going to add is I'm going to hit next here. It's role based, and it's going to be my particular server. Actually, you know what? Before I do this, let's back out and let's reboot just so I get the new computer name listed up here. There's one more setting that we'll want to change since we're requiring a reboot here. We're going to go into the control panel real fast. So I'm going to hit the start button and just simply type in control panel or type in control, and control panel should populate here. I could have also hit the icon that was listed on the start menu. I'm then going to come into my system and security section, and under system, I'm going to come in, and you may know a different way of getting here, and that's cool. We're just going to go in here to the advanced system settings, and under the performance section, under my settings option, I'm going to go all the way over here to the data execution prevention. And what I want to do here, the default is for data execution prevention to be turned on for all programs and services except for those selected below. I want to turn that off. I want to make it so that it's only for Windows programs and services. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. It tells me it has to reboot. See, I saved myself a reboot. Hit OK again. Go ahead and close this down. And let's go ahead and reboot this bad boy. I'm going to right-click on the Start window, select Shutdown or Sign Out, and I'm going to do a restart. Have to give it a reason why I'm restarting. We'll just say Other Planned. And we'll let it restart. Okay, now that that's restarted, we're going to go in, log back in again. Oops, come on. Put in our top secret password. Okay, after it's rebooted, oh, looks like I got a couple services having a problem, but they should clear themselves up here. I'm just going to click on it real fast to make sure. I'm going to right click and see what it is. Yeah, these are automatic delays. So these eventually will come up. Okay, so what I can't fully show you is how to install the Hyper-V server. Because this box is virtualized, I can't install a virtualization on it. I mean, that's like endless mirrors. You know how you put two mirrors facing each other and they go on forever? We can't do that. So I'm going to take you through step by step, though. But at some point, I'm going to have to stop because I'll actually get a failure. But you will continue on to install the Hyper-V role. So how do we install Hyper-V? It's very easy. We're going to go through and add a role or a feature. I'm going to hit Next. It's going to be a role-based installation. Hit Next. Asks for the server. It's our EH host machine. And the role we're going to install is Hyper-V. It tells me that it needs to install some additional tools for Hyper-V to work, and those are going to be our GUI-based tools as well as a PowerShell environment for Hyper-V. I'm going to hit Add the Feature. And this is where it's going to tell me here that it can't be installed. You will just simply continue to hit Next, take the defaults. Let me jump out to a screenshot here for you, so hang on a second. So after you select that as a role to install, you'll be then presented with basically a summary screen of about what you're about to do. You're going to go ahead and select Next. It'll then go through and try to identify the network adapter that's on your host machine. If you don't see one listed here, it's because you need to install a driver for that NIC. We're going to use this NIC, or what's the concept here is that virtual machines can actually gain access to the public network or outside of their virtual environment using a network interface. Hyper-V just needs to be aware of it. So you're going to select your NIC. It then is making some assumptions about the fact that you may be trying to do a migration, or you may want to support what they refer to as live migrations, where you can have one Hyper-V virtual machine move from one server to another Hyper-V server. You don't need to worry about this. This is not a Hyper-V class. That's not what we're trying to accomplish here. So you just leave the defaults, which is not to select the checkbox. And then finally, it's going to show you your default store locations. Where do you want to put the virtual machines, as well as where do you want to put the configuration files? And you can change these up if you want. Maybe point them to the directory of your CEH project folder, or you can leave it here as well. If this, again, was a Hyper-V class, we would teach you to do something a little bit different. So it's going to require a restart, and maybe two restarts. And what's happening during these restarts is it goes through and takes the parent OS, which is the OS you just installed, and in between it and the actual hardware, it places what we refer to as a hypervisor, which in our case is Hyper-V. And what this does for us is it allows, in this case then, for the hardware to interact that's hosted on the host OS to be accessible to the child partitions or the child operating systems or the virtualized machines without having to recreate them over and over. We actually just use the same drivers. Whatever drivers are loaded on the host machine get utilized so long as the virtual machines are supported by Hyper-V. They should use the same drivers, and it's really, really quite smooth. So that's what you're doing. And you can always uninstall Hyper-V if you want to as well. Since the release of this course, Microsoft has come out with some additional OSs that have without
Hyper-V
having to recreate them over and over.
It used to be limited just to the server platform, and that was Server 08, 2012, and of course 2016 has it. But since Windows 8, 8.1, and of course Windows 10, the Pro and Enterprise editions now support Hyper-V as well, and installing them is just as easy. So whether you use Server 2012, 2016, 08, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, or Windows 10, it doesn't matter. Even a Mac version running Fusion, if you'd like. Doesn't matter so long as you get to some virtualization is my whole goal here for you.
Okay, so after you log in, if there's not a Hyper-V Manager icon on your desktop, you should be able to find it under your Start menu, or just simply by clicking on the Windows Start button in the bottom left-hand corner and type in Hyper-V. And then I put a shortcut. I'll actually right-click on it and say, please just add it to my desktop as a shortcut. And here it is right here. When you double-click on it, or you don't have to necessarily put it on your desktop, but when you open it up regardless, you're going to be taken into the Hyper-V Management Console. Now, you can see here that I've got my Bat Top, which is my laptop here. I've got the Bat Cave and Bat Cave 2. I've got a couple of different Hyper-V servers in my network environment. I'm pretending at this point that the Bat Top is actually the host machine, which it is in my case. It's my host machine at this point. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is I'm going to want to install, remember how we said we need to make sure these machines are networked together, but they can't talk to the host machine, nor can they talk out to the internet or to our production environment. Well, we do that by creating what they refer to as virtual switches. So I'm going to come over here on my right-hand side and select I'd like to create a virtual switch. And the virtual switch that I'm going to create is going to be, I have either external, internal, or private. And let me tell you, give you a crash course here on Hyper-V. If I select external, nice little description down here, it tells you that if the if the virtual machines are hooked onto this network, they will have access to the network card, which would be access to the production environment, and the internet if the host machine has access to the internet. It means that the virtual machines will all get their own IP addresses as well. So they were picked up as just standard machines on your network. The internal network, if I select this one, this basically says the virtual machines can talk to each other as well as they can talk to the host machine, but they can't get beyond the host machine. And I don't want that to take place either. Instead, I'd like to do a private network and a private switch. And a private switch means that the virtual machines can only talk to themselves, and that is it. They can't talk to the host machine, which is my Bat Top machine. They only talk to each other. So that's what I'd like to create. I'm going to select to create the switch. You'll notice it created it. The default, Microsoft doesn't know what to name it. They just call it the virtual switch. So I'm going to type this one in, or I'm going to create a name and we'll call it Hacking Network. So I know what that is. And if I need to change it, maybe I go, oops, I actually wanted that to be an external. You can switch it over to external. You then select which network adapter you want to put this on. Be careful if you ever decide to do a virtual machine this way, because it will interrupt the host connectivity because it has to hook into it. And so you'll lose internet connectivity or network connectivity to the host machine for about 3 seconds as it configures it. But in our case, again, we're just doing a private network. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And there's my host machine with Hyper-V ready for me to start installing my virtual machines. As far as other virtualized products that may cost money, we can kind of get around that by maybe playing around with some trial versions, or even just stepping up to the plate and paying for them. One of the ones that I enjoy using is something that's referred to as VMware. I'm going to go ahead and open up my browser here. Let's make this biggie size. And I'm just going to simply come in here and type in vmware.com. And it's going to take me to the VMware site. Now, there's a ton of products that they make, both at the server level, at the cloud level. We're looking for a desktop solution. So if I hit the products over here, I have the ability to use either Fusion for Mac, which is a paid product that does virtualizations on Macs. It does a beautiful job of the Windows environment. You can use Workstation Pro. This is the one I would recommend. I need to tell you, though, you could use Player somewhat. Player only allows you to run or launch one virtual machine at a time. That's the major. It's totally free, but you can only get one machine going. So I'm going to come in here to the Pro section, and you'll notice here it has all the sales pitch here for the Pro Edition. Again, if the page is changed, don't worry. It's just that VMware changed this web page, and hopefully the links will be the same, or the layout will be somewhat the same, so that you can do what I'm doing here. I'm going to come over here where it says download now, and it takes me here to a page that then says, okay, hey, look, if you want to try this out, you can try it out. I'm going to come down here and I can either try it out on Linux or I can try it out on Windows. I'm going to go ahead and select download now. It says, okay, where do you want to save this bad boy? We'll go ahead and make sure that we save it in our download directory here. So I'm in downloads, good. I'm going to hit save. And of course, again, at the time of this recording, this is version 14 of the Workstation Edition. So again, I'm going to pause the video while we wait for this to finish to download, and then I'll continue after it's done. Okay, so it looks like it's done downloading. We'll go ahead and just launch it right now. I'm going to hit the run command. It's going to come up and say, hey, are you sure you want to install this? This is part of the UAC for Windows 10. I'm going to hit yes. And of course, again, we're going to get hopefully a little faster hamsters running around the wheel now. We'll go ahead and minimize the web browser here so we can see everything that's going on. And here comes the installation. We're going to go ahead and hit next. I'm going to agree to the license agreement. You don't need to install the enhanced keyboard driver. I'm just going to go ahead and hit next here. And then again, it's going to say, hey, you want to do updates on startup or check for them? Do you want to be part of the customer experience improvement program? I'm just going to hit next. Create the shortcuts and hit install. Again, we're going to pause the video as it goes through and does the installation. Oh, it's relatively fast here. Maybe I won't pause. Yeah, let's just go ahead and keep going here. So we get a desktop icon representing VMware Workstation for us. Again, this is doing the same thing that the Hyper-V does. It's creating a hypervisor for us on top of the host operating system. You can see here now it's installing the virtual network drivers. And we'll take a look at how VMware handles networking here in just a second. It is a little different than what we saw in Hyper-V. So we're going to go ahead and hit Finished. And of course, at this point, we can go through and launch VMware Workstation by double-clicking on it. And it says, okay, here's what's asking for your license key. Well, as I mentioned before, you can try this for 30 days. Note it's 30 days from the time that you launch or the time I hit OK. So again, you can use this product all you want. Like here's my UAC popping up within those 14 days. And then afterwards, I believe it's about $149, at least at the time of this recording, to purchase the full product. Now, to create a virtual machine, we just simply select Create a Virtual Machine. So I'm going to select Typical here. I'm going to hit Next. And here's what's kind of cool is that you can either install from the physical DVD or you can select an ISO. Now, with VMware, it's relatively smart with the newer operating systems like Windows 10, Server 2016. When you select to install from those, it'll actually do a silent install for you, which is kind of cool. You don't have to go through all the different steps. It just goes through and installs for us. I'm going to go ahead and just select I'm going to install one later just so I can get to where I want to get to, which is talking about the networking infrastructure here. It does ask, as far as the operating system itself, do I plan on installing Windows, Linux? You can see the different OSs here. Within Windows, I can go through and select, hey, I'm going to install Windows 8X. I'm going to hit Next. And the reason why it's asking me these questions is that it's going to go through and actually give me some best practices or some best tweaks as far as memory and hard drive space is concerned. Now, at this location here, when we're looking at the new virtual machine wizard, this is the location where it's going to install our virtual machine. You don't want to necessarily take that as a default. So I'm going to click on my browse button here, and I'm actually going to go back to my drive where we have the CEH project. And again, I'm going to create a folder for this new machine. We'll just call it Windows 8.1. I'm going to hit OK. And then, of course, it's going to go through and say, okay, what's the disk size that you're going to utilize? We recommend at least 60 gig. And here's a choice you need to make, and that is whether to store the virtual machine as a single file or multiple files. And the advantage, of course, of doing multiple is that when you move a virtual machine from one computer to another, it's very slick and easy to do. I'm a bigger fan of just keeping everything as a single disk, or I should say as a single file on the disk. So I'm going to select the top option there. I'm going to hit Next. It gives me a summary, and of course I can go back and change things if I want. This is our configuration interface for VMware. I'm going to hit Close. I'm just going to hit Finished, and there's my new machine. Now, the thing I wanted to show you here is the default setting for the network interface, and that is to be NATed. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on NAT. It's going to open up the network interface here for me, or the configuration. And again, you'll see here that I've got a couple of different options. So let's start with the top one real fast. A bridged network environment is where we're going to bridge the network so that the virtual machine has direct access to the external network. So it's going to get its own IP address, and it's going to look like a real machine on the network itself. NAT means that it's going to obviously just use the current host IP address, kind of like what your router does for your network at your house. Then there's what they refer to as host-only networking. Now, host-only networking provides a network connection between the virtual machine and the host. So if like you need to transfer files back and forth. You can also specify a custom network interface. And if we do that, we can go through and say, this is going to be strictly, you'll notice here the interface is already being taken up. There's a VMnet 1 for that host only option, and there's a VMnet 8, which is used for the NAT option. Well, I can go through and select VMnet 0 as a network interface for me. And all the machines that I would install inside of VMware, if I select them to be on the same network, they can talk to each other, but they won't be able to talk to the host machine. Does that make sense? So I'm going to hit OK. You'll notice that it changed it to VMnet 1. And of course, again, you can go through, let me go back in here real fast. You can go through and pick whichever number you want. 0 just happens to be the first one that's available to us. So other than that, all the setup steps that I show you, or I've showed you in the Hyper-V world, are going to apply here. So you'd want to just go through, install your virtualized machines, put them on VMnet 0, and then you should be able to continue on with additional installations. Okay, so in this section, we went through, and first of all, we talked about the do's and don'ts. You remember those? You do promise to learn the tools. You promise that you will not, you don't use these on your production environment, nor against me. I will hunt you down. We also went through and talked about the different clients that we'll go through and create. We've got some modules, some additional modules coming up that'll show you how to install those one at a time in case you don't know how to do that. We also went through and showed you that the need for us to create a virtualized network so that, again, when we do the attacks and run some of these tools, that we're not doing it against a production environment. It's completely separated. We won't damage anything. Again, you got to be careful. I've been in classes where we were teaching at a particular training center, and I had students that were running the tools on the production side and actually took down, even though they are in a separate VLAN, they were taking down the business side of that learning center. It was really quite not fun. We then took you into how to set up the host machine using Microsoft's virtualization solution called Hyper-V. And again, you can use any virtualization that you want, so long as you achieve the same objective, and that is getting your clients so they communicate with each other, but not on the production side. Okay, up next, we're going to go through and show you how to install and configure the server client virtual machines so you can use those as targets.